Willful blindness is something we all do. The mental defense mechanism we all have to try to help us cope when things get too painful, when things get too scary, too stressful. Okay, children and adults both all do that. The question is, how much are we doing it? And question the degree in which we are doing it, how much harm will it cause? Okay, this is an issue. So, and then this is where I came across this quote. People often remain in the dark, not due to lack of light, but of failure to open their eyes. People cannot see, not because there isn't information out there. People cannot see because they choose not to see the information out there. So there's, in other words, two kinds of blindness, or two kinds of ignorance. One is probably because there isn't any information out there. But however, more often than not, it is because we have chosen not to see. Okay? We have chosen not to see. We have chosen to ignore. So willful blindness, another way of other words that we can use to explain willful blindness, according to the book, is conscious avoidance. Consciously choosing to avoid. Okay? Consciously turning our eyes from, basically. Now, to be able to avoid something, we actually have seen the something. We must have seen it to avoid it. But we forget what we see. We consciously forget it, what we see. That is what conscious avoidance is. Okay? Not that we don't see. We turn our eyes from it so that we can forget it. It is deliberate indifference. Or we purposely choose to say, oh, it's not important. In other words, it's a choice inside our mind, right? To park the information that we have seen as not important, to waste my energy on it. Not important for me to bother with it. That's what's called deliberate indifference. Or sometimes it's also referred to as deliberate ignorance, or willful ignorance, or contrived ignorance, or even intentional ignorance. Right? Intentional ignorance, right, is something you didn't see. You have seen it. It's just that you choose not to pay any more attention to it. That's why ignore it. Okay? You can only ignore something you have seen by choosing not to put any more attention to it. That's why once we look at willful blindness, very often we begin to recognize that it is not talking about things we have not seen. It's talking about things we have seen. Things that exist inside our mind. Pictures that we have already captured inside our mind. It's just that we have somehow made a choice not to put any more attention to it. Now, when we do that, we need to recognize, that's why the author says, when we do that, the problem arises when we use this mechanism to deny the uncomfortable truth that cry out for acknowledgement, for debate, for action, for change. And so when we ignore, the problem will grow, giving rise to crimes committed in full view of others. Giving rise, when it grows, the problem becomes so big and very often leading to legal case in 2001 both were found guilty of scandal, of Can you all hear me still? Hello? Please indicate if you are okay. Because my side, I just saw lost connection, lost network. So I pause. Okay. Now, in the Enron case, I don't know how many of you follow the Enron case. Maybe you are still very young. This is 2001. So you are only a few years old. But for me, I was in my 40s. Okay, early 40s. Now, so this is a big case because it is one of those huge international cases where it involved billions of dollars. What happened is Enron is a very big company. And in January 2001, the share price, the price of the Enron share was at $83 USD, yeah? At 83 USD dollar. Within 10 months, by November 2001, the share of the price of the share fell from $83 to less than $1. Can you imagine investor who own thousands of shares? Thousands of shares at $83, right, is what? $83,000 over dollars. If you say 1,000 share at $83, it's $83,000. Within 1 year, the share price dropped to $1, less than $1. Even if you put $1 from $83,000, suddenly the Enron share value dropped to 1,000. Can you imagine? People declare bankrupt, man. A lot of the shareholder gone bankrupt. And this is because of responsibility of the CEO and the CFO. Somehow, now the share don't fall down like that, don't crash like that. A company don't suddenly change its value from such a high value at $83 per share, and suddenly the value just disappeared. It doesn't do things like that. Unless inside the company, there are a lot of cover up. So basically, they are declaring the value of the company that doesn't exist. Now, who should know that? CEO and CFO. Now, what happened? Basically, in the court case, the judge says this. The judge says, you may find that a defendant had knowledge of a fact if you find that the defendant deliberately closed his eyes to what would otherwise have been obvious to him. Knowledge can be inferred if the defendant deliberately blinded himself to the existence of a fact. So basically what happened is the CEO and the CFO, because he wants to protect his image and his position, he keeps shutting his eyes to the malpractice that the internal is having towards the value of the company. So eventually cannot cover up anymore. So it crashed. So in the court case, the two person was declared guilty. Guilty due to willful blindness. And that's why there's this additional terminology for willful blindness. It's also referred to very often as Nelsonian knowledge, a term used in law to describe a situation in which a person seeks to avoid civil and criminal liability for a wrongful act by intentionally keeping themselves unaware of facts that would render him or her liable or implicated. In other words, you choose to ignore the possibility that you are doing something wrong. In Enron case, the possibility that you are doing something wrong by fabricating the true value of the company. Why? Because he wants to protect his position and his image as the CEO and the CFO, as one of the biggest company in the world. So it becomes legal. That means willful blindness is actually used in court of law. And in fact, I go and search internet in Malaysia, willful blindness in Malaysia. Actually, it also is a legal term used in court case in Malaysia, and very often related to drug carrier. Those people who are caught with drug trying to cross the border. They are always, in Malaysia especially, there are a few cases in this case, in Australia, in Thailand, in Malaysia. Some people are caught with drugs in their bag when they try to cross the border. And then when the police catch them, they say, I don't know. I'm only carrying it from my friend, or I'm carrying it for my boyfriend, or somebody pay me to carry it, but not to look into it. I have no idea there were drugs inside. So what happened basically is this. The carrier, the person who was choosing to carry the bag filled with drugs, intentionally blind himself to check. In other words, he intentionally ignored the possibility. Why? Because he wants to preserve something else. The carrier, maybe want to preserve the relationship, want to ignore the fact that the boyfriend may be a criminal, or maybe whoever asked him to carry, pay him $1,000, and the person choose to intentionally ignore the possibility of something illegal in the bag because the person won the $1,000. And in most of these cases, when the prosecutor have found the carrier, the defendant, to practice willful blindness, actually the carrier is found guilty. That's why there is this legal term here. And which is why it is extremely dangerous. Willful blindness in extreme cases can lead to legal matters, meaning you can be declared guilty of a criminal charge. Especially when, in fact, willful blindness do not excuse you from the crime committed. So please be very clear that willful blindness can be extremely dangerous. So the legal concept of willful blindness started in the 19th century, actually. Okay, where I presume where people begin to use this as an excuse from being prosecuted. Okay, and in the 19th century, it states that you are responsible if you could have known or should have known. Look very carefully, yeah. Could have and should have something that instead you strive, or you choose not to know or not to see. It doesn't matter if you are ignorant, but if you choose to be ignorant, you are still held responsible according to the legal concept of willful blindness. The law doesn't care why you remain ignorant, only that you have made a choice to do so. That's why most of these carrier, those people who have been somehow bought or somehow, I don't know, I wouldn't even call it trick. Actually, they trick themselves. Okay, they trick themselves by blinding themselves from the possibility because of love, because of the money offered, because of, I don't know, what else. So this is the legal implication of willful blindness, the legal concept of willful blindness. Then the question is why? Why do people do it? Why do people take the risk and end up in such deep trouble? Why do we choose to keep ourselves in the dark when there can be serious repercussion? This is what the book, the author will be trying to help us understand. What drives a person to choose to keep themselves in the dark? What are the forces at work that makes a person deny the threat? Very often, that is so obvious. I mean, it's very clear. If you were to carry a bag across the border, people, the immigration is going to check your bag. But yet, people still carry them without looking into the bag. So what was at play inside their mind that made them do and take such a risk? This is what the author will be trying to look into. What stops us or stop these people from seeing that when you bury this knowledge or when you ignore this knowledge, it makes that problem more powerful and makes us so much more vulnerable. The choice to be ignorant makes the danger more harmful and makes us or gets us in greater risk. And yet we do it. So why? What is the forces at play inside our mind? Why sometimes we even repeat it? When we have tasted, often we have heard the word once bitten, twice shy. But when there is a case of willful blindness, no, we are even blind to the once bitten. So why, after any major failure or calamity, do voices still emerge saying that they have seen the danger, they have been warned about the risk, but yet we don't listen to the warning? We choose to ignore the warning. We willfully blind ourselves to our past experience. Why? And why, as individual or as company or even as a country, do we so regularly look into the mirror and exclaim, how could we have been so blind? How can we make such stupid mistake? I mean, we say things like that. Why am I so stupid? Isn't it? If it is the first time, fine. Often it's a repeated. Why are we so stupid? What is happening inside our mind that makes that gets us, land us in this stupidity? In his introduction, Margaret found a discovery about who would have a tendency. Is it do we end up practicing willful blindness more so if we are in a company or individually? Now, according to Margaret, he says no. Both do it equally. Individuals singly as a single, in other words, as a one person, or even as a group, are both equally susceptible to willful blindness. Both. As an individual as well as in a group. Both are equally blind. But the problem is not in the choice to be blind. If you are only one person choosing to be blind, obviously the consequences won't be so great. Won't be as great as a group of people being blind. The only difference is not the forces at play to make a person blind or make a group of person blind. That's the same. But the consequence, and that's what is different. The consequence of one person willfully blind is only one person pay. But if the consequence for a group, especially in an organization, then it's a downfall and an impact, and the consequences will be faced by all. So the consequence of a group of person, of people, or an organization, the consequence is far, far greater. And even more so in that case, we need to be very clear that we seek not to fall into willful blindness as a group. Now, willful blindness, how does willful blindness works? This is just a basic explanation. Margaret gives a small basic explanation of how willful blindness is triggered inside our mind. First, we have to recognize we have always got cognitive limitation. Our brain cannot register every information that comes through our eyes and our ears, or the input. There's way too much information that enters our brain every moment, every day. So our brain automatically do a filtering process. Our brain will choose to focus. We cannot focus on everything, way too much. But the problem is not that we cannot focus on anything. It's somehow what affect our choices. You see, are we as human beings that logical that we are able to seriously choose which information that enter our mind are the important information and that we should pay attention to, and which are the less important information that we should ignore? No, we don't do that. We are not that logical. So somehow in our brain, when we apply the choice, the choosing of what to focus on, what information to focus on, and what not to focus on, ideally, when we talk about it logically, we would say, yes, we should focus on information that are important and ignore those that are less. But however, there is a biasness in our brain, in our mind. We mostly admit information that makes us feel great about ourselves, while conveniently altering whatever unsettles our fragile ego and most vital belief. In other words, we are not logically choosing what is important. We are biasly choosing what we feel. We need to realize that very often what we feel are not necessarily what is the most important. What we feel has got to do with our self-esteem issue, our insecurity issue, not necessarily logically the things that are important, the things that have give rise to the biggest impact in our life. And this is what's happening inside that create willful blindness. We fall into the mistake of allowing our feeling to determine what information we choose to look into and what information we choose to ignore. And this is where it creates the possible willful blindness because of the biasness in our brain due to our insecurities or due to our habit, our past habit. And some of these things that drive this insecurity, these are some. Love, ideology, okay, fear of conflict, fear of change, somehow the overemphasis of money are some of the things that induces this blindness. In other words, our habitual mindset. That's why this willful blindness is very much related to attitude. The habitual thinking process. And if you have gone through the attitude class, you would be reminded, and you'll be reminded of the fact that a lot of our habitual thinking process was developed through childhood, and they are not necessarily right. In fact, none of us have a perfect habitual thinking process. And that's why this habitual thinking process, if we allow it to run its own course, will somehow make us help, trigger us to make the wrong choices about what information to retain and what information to ignore. And often the important information that we ignore due to the habitual thinking process is creating the willful blindness that can lead to problems in the future. And that's the danger. Such blindness, when left unacknowledged, unchecked, grow more powerful and more dangerous. And over time, you always have to bear in mind, over time, the problem will compound. This is what happened. Initially, the beginning of our willful ignorance, in the beginning when we choose to close one eye, the beginning, the problem is never too big. Same thing with the Enron case. It's never that big. When people choose to ignore, okay, I delay a bit on reporting the true value of the company, the true profit margin of the company. I delay a bit. But if I get away with delay, I will delay more. It creates a habit, the thing that you can get away with ignoring important information, with blinding ourselves to what may be causing problem. And the more we willfully blind ourselves, the more easier it is for us to continue to blind ourselves. And before you know it, the danger accumulate and compound until it become very big. This is the same thing with a lot of the credit card or the loan. Now that's why now no good. Now you will realize spending on credit has become easier and easier, especially now with COVID-19. Do you realize that you can get loan very easily? Government, banks give you loan. They're desperate. Credit card, same thing, issue credit card. Today, more young people are declared bankrupt because of credit card debt. Why? Because it's easy to apply credit card. And the easier it is for them to ignore the accumulation of debt, because it's so easy to continue to blind ourselves so that it doesn't interrupt with our enjoying buying what we want to buy, chasing all the new trend. So this delusion in thinking that by blinding ourselves, by not looking at something, we feel safe, we feel less stress, we feel happier. But in actual fact, it leaves us crippled, vulnerable, and powerless in the future, because the future problem, when it becomes so big, we will be powerless to overcome it, leaving us in a devastated situation. That's why this is very, very important for us to realize. Willful blindness is very common, and it starts small, and over time it becomes too big for us to overcome. So when the time, but if we deal with this when it's still early, then we have control. We really have power, because then we are still in control, and we are now training ourselves to be stronger in coping with stress and with difficult information. The more we ignore, the less training we have to cope with it, and the more we fall into the habit of thinking, of fantasizing that it is safe when it is not. And when the time comes and the thing is too big for you to ignore, it's also too big for you to handle, because you have not been trained to handle any of this difficulty. Your power lies in confronting the issues when it is still small, so that you can train yourself to cope with it. This is where willful blindness is extremely harmful. It gets you to enjoy a fantasy while the difficulty grows bigger, right? Leaving you powerless. So that when the time comes, with time, the problem becomes too big for you to handle. So what we're going to do in the next few chapters, what the author is going to do in the next few chapters, is to create different aspects, different ways, different mindset that we may fall into practicing this willful blindness. What are the different mental thinking process, right, that we can get caught into practicing willful blindness? Now, this is the awakening process, because once we are able to identify the elephant, or even a mouse for that matter, then we will know how to deal with it. We can't deal with something we do not realize yet, or we cannot identify. Not that we do not see, Often we see, but we don't identify. There's a big difference between seeing and identifying. Very often we see, but we cannot identify. We cannot relate. We cannot find the meaning. We cannot attach to it meaning. So what we can do from studying this book is to be able to attach the meaning, the danger to this information, to these things that we are seeing. So once we are able to identify the danger to these things we are seeing, then the next time we see it, hopefully we remember, and the danger that can come along with it, and through it, begin to do something to stop it, to stop the thing from growing beyond your capability to deal with it. So that's the whole point of studying this book. Okay? Identifying the dangers, the different areas that willful blindness can create harm and danger to the future, to your future. Okay, that's the end. Any question? Huh? QQ said too young. Too young what? Too young to face all the problem, to have all the problems? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. 2001. Enron. That's the first biggest case ever. Now a lot more. Now always bear in mind, always remember, huge problem doesn't happen overnight. Huge success also doesn't happen overnight. Similarly, huge problem doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. But yet, why, if a problem can take so long to become so bad, how can anybody allow a problem to continue for so long until it becomes so bad? Because willful blindness. Because it's always uncomfortable to confront. So the Enron case, same thing. It doesn't, a big giant company like that doesn't just in 1 year collapse one and declare bankrupt one. Doesn't. Okay. But problem basically in life very often is this. We do what is called whitewashing. Actually, inside is rotting. But yet outside we keep painting it. We keep painting with a new coat of paint. We keep focusing on looking good. And other people, so when we look good, other people will continue to give us the due attention that makes us feel good. But inside is rotting. But the day will come when the inside is hollow. And when it's hollow, the whole thing will collapse. Agree. Yvonne, what you say is correct. Take, for example, global warming, our whole environmental issue. Right? Do you realize that global warming, Al Gore, what year? I can't remember what year he wrote the book on the Inconvenient Truth. I think more than 20 years ago, or 20 years, I think close to 20 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, it's around 2001, the Inconvenient Truth come out. So 19 years. And people are still choosing to be blind. A lot of the things that scientists have already speculated is happening. Okay? And yet, people still choose, and especially government. Government still choose to ignore. They focus on the short term. Okay? If we remember the 7 Habits Highly Effective People, the 4 quadrant, first thing first, the 4 quadrant. The urgent and the important. Okay? We often apply willful blindness to what is important. Why? Because we are blinded by what is urgent. Oh, definitely. You're right, Yvonne. Okay? They are blinded. Why? By their position, by their career. They are so concerned about retaining their career. A lot, not just, this is not just government. This is culture. Do you realize that a lot of companies, a lot of businesses are also blind? What are they blind to? They are blind to the future of their business. They are so concerned about the money they can earn today that they fail to focus on the value of the company to ensure that their company still survive tomorrow. So they go and bullshit. So bullshit already, they earn, they take their money, they chow. Then next round, they start another company and bullshit again. It's short term. What they fail to understand basically is this. It will go around in one circle and then come back and wallop them. Okay? And if it doesn't wallop them, it doesn't hurt them, it's going to hurt their children. Willful blindness may not hurt you that badly yet, but it will definitely hurt your children. Now, some people will even come to to this reasoning. If you can't beat them, join them. They are doing it. I don't do. I don't do, then I lose. I cannot beat them, what? Why not join them? Do you realize what will happen? First issue basically is this. First thing, everything will get worse faster. More people join the bandwagon and the bandwagon will roll down the hill faster. The weight of the bandwagon will increase the speed of the bandwagon rolling down the hill, destroying everybody. But there is a second thing, a more personal impact. The more you willfully blind yourself, the less strength and capability you have to cope with the problem that will come. You see, choosing to face truth, choosing to face reality will train you to cope with the difficulty that will come. Choosing to ignore will only leave you weak. And not only you, bear in mind, your children will see your example, they will also be weak. So facing it builds you strength, train you, and then your children see, it will also train your children, your next generation. So how we choose the uncomfortable option rather than the comfortable option. Okay. For me, this is what I do. I see the future discomfort and the future danger. And I see it far bigger than today's danger. I see the harm in 10 years will be bigger than the harm in this year. First. Second, that I use all the time. I believe by faith, I will be held accountable. I will be asked to give an account of what I do with my life. If I am required to come to the judge, the ultimate judge of life, to give an account for what I have done or did not do, for what I see and confront and did not or choose not to see or confront. Now, what do you think? If I have to give an account, do I want to be able to say, yes, I have done what I could? Or do I want to say, I have chosen to ignore and pretend and did nothing? These two things keep me, drive me, reminds me to choose the uncomfortable option. One, see the future, see further than everybody else. Then you are able to see the danger that is worse than now. And two, see that at the end of life, for everybody, we are required to give an account. for what we have done with our life. Whether we have chosen to confront and do our best, or whether we have chosen to be blind. Now, this is how I do it. Any other question? Any other thoughts? Any other comment? Input? Sharing? Anything not clear? I already answered already, yeah. I already answered. The last answer is that. I saw and then yeah. Thank Iwan. Luckily you heard. Yeah. Well, very often, blindness got to do with also short-sightedness. It's related. Short-sightedness got physical, got also mental, your mind. To be honest, today's people are very short-sighted. They look only about what they can enjoy today, what they can buy today, what security they have today. They're not thinking long enough. And in fact, through some conversation that I always have with people, people will ask, why do you want to think so far? When you die lah. Why you worry about how you die and what's going to happen after you die? To me, sorry. Okay? Maybe because when I was young, I was always taught, you cannot afford to only start digging the ground when you get a stomach ache. Okay? You can't afford to do that. Today, nowadays, everything is instant. It's fast. That's why people don't know how to appreciate. When you are in the jungle and when you're going camping, right? There are some things you do way ahead. When you go and set up camp, you start preparing for all the possibilities. You cannot afford to only start to do it when it comes. It's too late. It's too late. Okay? You prepare for the unforeseen. Yeah, Yvonne, I think difficulty, you say it's hard to imagine. You see, hard is a question of practice. It's not hard to me. Why? Because I practice seeing further. I always, ever since I started reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. And it says that imagine you are dead and you are attending your own funeral. Ever since then, that's how far I will think. I will think what I will require to do after I'm dead. Immediately after. What I will hopefully be able to see or hear when I leave, my spirit leave my body. So it is hard simply because you never tried doing it often enough. If you ask Nicole David, is playing squash hard or easy? If you ask Lee Chong Wei, is playing badminton hard or easy? To them, it's super easy. Why? Practice. It becomes easy through practice. And today, the peer pressure, everybody is thinking so short term. No, don't. Because imagine what will happen. If everybody keep thinking short term, do you realize it becomes shorter and shorter term? 5 years become 3 years, 3 years become 1 year, 1 year become 6 months, 6 months become 1 month. When everybody thinks short term, you are increasing the angle of the downhill slope. In other words, the shorter term people think, the faster people crash. The faster the economy will crash. The faster the inflation will rise. Problem become worse when you think shorter term. When you think longer term, things begin to level up. Isn't it? If you think carefully, isn't it? Yes, so true. Sometimes I find myself also fall into the trap of short-sightedness. What to do? Practice. Ask yourself the question. The first question I always want to challenge you is the 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. And then habit 1, proactive. Take responsibility for you choosing to do that. Every day, every morning, maybe ask yourself the question, or every week or every month, spend enough time to ask yourself, what does it look like on the day I die? What will I be like on the day that I die? What will I have achieved on the day that I die? What will I leave behind on the day that I die? What will people say of me on the day that I die? What will I say to the judge of life when I see him after I die? These are questions you have to learn to ask. Ask until it becomes a habit, and then it will no longer be hard. So a lot of times when they choose blindness, most of them are their habit kicking in, telling them to think near future. Yes, but it's not just habit, it's also peer pressure. Okay? Yes. There are a lot of factors, but yes, it is also our culture and our bad habit. We have to build good habit and eliminate bad habit. We have to replace this bad habit with good habit. Once you replace the bad habit with a good habit, then no. Then you will choose side because you have a long-term vision. You have a habit of seeing long-term. How to practice? I think, Jesse, your question also, I think a lot of people ask. First thing you need to always realize is this. Always realize. How old is your bad habit? Let me ask you. How old is our bad habit? The bad habit we still have, how old is it? Our age. If you are 25, then your bad habit that you are still practicing is 25 years old. For me, I still have bad habit 60 years old. You don't wait until your bad habit becomes 60 years old, I can tell you. Which do you think will be easier to overcome? A 25-year-old bad habit or a 60-year-old bad habit? Okay, let's not compare you and me. Let's ask yourself, which do you think is easier to overcome? A habit that you have today, or choose not to do anything about it, a habit that you still have next year? Do you think it's easier to overcome the habit you have today or the habit you still have next year? Always bear in mind, as long as you delay starting a new habit, it becomes harder to replace the old bad habit. If you take 25 years to develop this bad habit, it's going to take you years to replace it with a new habit. You cannot expect yourself to be able to overcome a 25-year-old habit in 25 minutes, in 25 hours, in 25 days, or in 25 months. Maybe can 25 months. The key is to start awaken and create the habit of being awakened. You see, once you are awake, you recognize its existence. Your next step is to think about that thing every day. If you are able to be reminded of that thing every day, you don't need to be awakened. Then you only need to be challenged to action. If you start acting every day, then you don't need to be worried about acting. You only need to be concerned about evaluating and making sure the action is correct. You have to develop the habit one step at a time. The first step is awake, and then become aware every day, every moment of the day. And then you become commit to do something about it one time. Then commit to do something about it every day. It is stages. You're not going to overcome the old habit tomorrow. And you are definitely not going to overcome the bad habit next year if tomorrow you don't remind yourself of this. If the next weeks you don't become conscious of this new thought. You don't make, you have to begin to make this new thinking a part of your everyday thinking. Now you understand why I always encourage, don't stop input. Because we forget. We have the weakness of forgetting. And so the idea is when you commit to a study group like this, despite the fact that it's so uncomfortable, it's so burdensome, what you are doing is you're making yourself not forget. That's all. You are forcing yourself into a situation that burdens you so that it doesn't give you a chance to forget. Why do you think I want to keep encouraging YMAT to keep having study group regardless and don't stop? The moment you choose to stop is the moment you allow yourself to forget. And then allow the old habit to gain strength. And then you delay overcoming the old habit. Even if the old habit, like in my case, is a 60-year-old habit, I may never be able to overcome it. But the fact that I commit to this study group, I am forced to reduce the damage of this old habit, bad habit. Do you realize that? Maybe I won't. Maybe I would never have a chance to literally clean myself, rid myself of this bad habit. Nevertheless, does that mean I don't commit? No, I commit in order to reduce the impact of the bad habit. Because why? Because every time I attend, it forces me to put myself on guard against the bad habit, even though I find it so difficult to overcome it. That's what life is all about at the end. Running the race, even though you are still holding on to certain bad habits. It's just that you reduce the impact of the bad habit while you are still running this race of life. I hope this answers your question on how to practice, how to change, how to transform. This got to do with also the habitual mindset, the attitude, same thing. It's not going to be easy to change the habitual mindset, the habitual thinking process. For you all are young, I keep repeating, for you all are young, you have 20 to 25-year-old habit, and that's good. Don't wait. Don't make it 21 to 26-year-old. Don't make it a 30-year-old habit. Don't stop it. Don't let it grow to become a 30, 40, 50-year-old habit. Now that you are aware and awake and aware of it,